The first Japanese soldier to be captured alive by American forces in the Pacific War, Ensign Kazuo Sakamaki, pilot of a midget submarine that ran aground near Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, lay in his hospital bed at Tripler Army Medical Center in Honolulu, expecting the worst. His training had drilled into him one unyielding truth: capture meant dishonor worse than death. The Senjin-kun Field Code of 1941 forbade surrender. To live as a prisoner was to betray the emperor, the family, the nation. Interrogation would bring torture, mutilation, execution, perhaps a slow beheading with a dull blade, as propaganda leaflets warned. Yet, when the American doctor entered, he spoke quietly, checked Sakamaki's wounds with gentle hands, and ordered hot soup brought to the bedside. No chains, no blows, just clean sheets and a nurse who smiled without mockery. Sakamaki stared at the ceiling, his mind reeling. This was not vengeance, this was courtesy. The dissonance clotted him deeper than any physical pain. By mid-1942, as the tide turned at Guadalcanal and more Japanese soldiers found themselves surrounded, wounded, or cut off in the jungles of New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, the pattern repeated with shocking consistency. A lieutenant from the 2nd Infantry Division, captured near Buna in January 1943, later recounted in post-war interrogations how he had hidden in a swamp for days, expecting to be shot on sight. Instead, Australian troops from the 7th Division pulled him out, offered water from their canteens, and bandaged his malaria-swollen legs without a word of abuse. The guards spoke in low tones through an interpreter, addressed him as Sir, and escorted him to a field hospital where medics cleaned his festering wounds with sulfa powder and administered quinine. He waited for the trap, the moment the politeness would shatter into cruelty, but it never came. In his diary smuggled back after repatriation, he wrote of the confusion. Their mercy felt like an insult to everything we had been taught. Why feed an enemy who would have killed them without hesitation? The shock deepened in the permanent camps. At Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, where several thousand Japanese POWs arrived by train from Pacific battlefields starting in 1944, the men stepped off into a world that defied every indoctrinated expectation. Electric lights burned in every barracks building, no flickering oil lamps, no blackout curtains. Hot showers steamed in tiled rooms, soap scented with something floral and foreign. Meals arrived 3 times daily, 2,800 calories of meat, potatoes, bread, vegetables, and milk, rations identical to those given American GIs. A former sergeant from the Imperial Guards Division, transferred to McCoy after capture on Saipan in July 1944, stood frozen at his first breakfast tray: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with butter. He later described the moment to interviewers. The smell alone made his stomach twist with guilt. In Japanese camps, Allied prisoners had subsisted on watery rice gruel laced with weevils, forced to bow until their foreheads touched the dirt before every guard. Here, the American sergeant in charge saluted smartly, explained the daily routine in halting Japanese learned from Nisei linguists, and informed the men they would receive 80 cents a day for voluntary farm labor, money they could spend at the camp canteen on cigarettes, candy, or writing paper. The psychological fracture was profound. Many POWs had watched comrades commit suicide rather than face capture. Others had been ordered to kill themselves if wounded. Surrender itself carried the stain of cowardice, a violation of Bushido that left them spiritually adrift. Yet these captors did not exploit that shame. At Camp Shelby in Mississippi and Fort Meade in Maryland, Japanese prisoners attended Buddhist services led by sympathetic chaplains, received Red Cross packages with books in kanji, and watched American movies projected on outdoor screens under summer stars. On Christmas 1944, local families, many with sons fighting in the Pacific, donated gifts: wool socks, chocolate bars, even handmade cards wishing peace. One prisoner, a machine gunner captured on Iwo Jima in February 1945, kept a small wooden carving sent by a stranger in Ohio. He turned it over in his hands for hours, unable to reconcile the gesture with the hatred he had been taught to expect. Australian and British camps produced similar reactions. At Cowra in New South Wales, where over 1,000 Japanese POWs were held by 1944, guards from the 22nd Garrison Battalion maintained strict discipline but refrained from casual brutality. Meals included mutton, vegetables, and tea. Medical orderlies treated tropical ulcers in beriberi with penicillin when it became available. A corporal from the 18th Army, captured in New Guinea, confided to a fellow prisoner that the absence of routine beatings left him disoriented. "They look at us as men," he whispered one night in the barracks, "not as dogs." The camp's famous breakout attempt on August 5, 1944, when over 1,000 men charged the wire in a desperate bid for honorable death, stemmed partly from this very confusion. The humane treatment eroded the will to resist, yet the ingrained code demanded a final act of defiance. 4 Australian guards died, and 234 Japanese took their own lives or were killed in the chaos, a tragic collision of cultures. In the Pacific Theater itself, forward interrogation tents run by ATIS, Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, teams often staffed by Nisei soldiers used kindness as a weapon. Starving, dysentery-racked prisoners brought in from bypassed islands received hot broth and cigarettes before questioning began. Ulrich Strauss, in his study of these interrogations, noted how the humane approach unlocked information that beatings never could. A major from the Kwantung Army, captured in Manchuria after Soviet entry in August 1945, broke down not from threats, but from the simple offer of a chair and a blanket. He said later, "I waited for the pain, but they only asked questions and listened." The asymmetry haunted them. While Japanese guards in camps like Changi, Cabanatuan, and along the Burma-Thailand Railway had starved, beaten, and worked Allied prisoners to death, killing 1 in 4, Allied guards adhered mostly to the Geneva Convention they had signed and Japan had ignored. This moral contrast left many Japanese POWs psychologically shattered, not by cruelty, but by decency. Some wept openly at their first sight of American Red Cross parcels. Others wrote post-war letters of gratitude to camp commanders, struggling to articulate the debt they felt. For men raised to see mercy as weakness, the polite treatment of their guards became the most disarming blow of the war, a quiet revelation that humanity could endure even in enmity. In the quiet barracks of those distant camps, as the war ended and repatriation ships prepared to sail in late 1945 and 1946, former enemies sat together over tea, sharing silences heavy with unspoken regret. The guards' final salutes carried no triumph, only the faint hope that understanding might outlast the hate. For the Japanese prisoners, the deepest wound was not the barbed wire or the labor. It was the realization that their captors had treated them better than their own army ever had.